From Santa Monica, California, this is Nakamichi Spoken Here. It's fairly obvious to most tape deck users that it takes a set of standards to make sure a tape recording made on one deck will play back properly on another. Unless all manufacturers agree to abide by these standards, there would be no interchangeability, and the result would be a mess. This is not at all difficult to understand, but when it comes to the audio cassette, there seems to be some confusion. What is stated on paper as the standard is not necessarily what one finds in the real world. That's the topic for this Nakamichi Spoken Here information cassette. Because there is much misinformation regarding playback equalization, we want you to understand how the standardization process works, and realize that Nakamichi, perhaps more so than any other cassette deck manufacturer, adheres strictly to the international standards which govern all cassette recording and playback. This is an issue of some interest, it seems, judging from the occasional field reports we get about cassette deck incompatibility. We are concerned, in particular, about rumors to the effect that Nakamichi decks have excellent high-frequency response because of some non-standard equalization. We want to put inaccurate statements of this kind to rest once and for all. Anybody who understands magnetic head technology and tape deck design knows you never get something for nothing. If you change electronic equalization to get better high-frequency response, there has to be a corresponding degradation in other performance areas, such as distortion or noise. In the last Nakamichi Spoken Here cassette, we explained why it takes superior magnetic head technology in order to excel in not just one or two, but all of these performance areas. Let's look at how playback equalization is standardized. Yes, there are many test tapes on the market which can be used to check the playback performance of a cassette deck. But these tapes are not the standard. The playback standard, instead, is a printed document issued by the IEC, an international standards organization to which all major audio manufacturers subscribe. Rather than stating what the electrical equalization should be for a deck's playback circuit, IEC publication number 94 states what the recorded signal levels should be at various frequencies. If we had an ideal playhead, that is, a head which exhibits no losses whatsoever, then a test tape recorded to IEC standard would only require the specified electrical equalization, such as 70 or 120 microseconds, in order to produce flat response. But since no head is completely free of loss, you have to compensate for these losses in order to make the head perform as though it were ideal. As you know from the previous Nakamichi Spoken Here cassette, most playhead losses occur at high frequencies, so that's where the bulk of the compensation must take place. Remember also that Nakamichi has a tremendous advantage in designing a proper playback system because Nakamichi heads have such low loss. If you think about how the standard works, it's really very sensible. Since no two playheads are alike, it doesn't make sense to have a fixed response for all playback circuits. Rather, you define a standard recording curve by specifying the signal levels on the tape, so that a properly recorded tape will produce the desired response when played through an ideal head. It is then up to the manufacturer to electrically compensate for the deficiencies in his playhead in order to bring about the proper response. This is the way it's been done for professional and consumer open reel decks for many years, and it's a proven method. So why all this noise about incompatibility among cassette decks? Well, the issue of cassette playback equalization was first raised about 6 years ago, and as you might expect, Nakamichi was very much involved in that controversy. Back then, we performed a detailed survey and found that actual playback curves varied enormously, and using Dolby noise reduction made the error even bigger. Many test tapes of that period exhibited a rising high end when played on Nakamichi decks, and this was believed to make tapes recorded on Nakamichis sound dull when played on other decks. We were able to prove quite easily that in such cases, the test tapes themselves were recorded inaccurately. Unfortunately, these test tapes with rising high-frequency response helped many manufacturers ignore the poor performance of their magnetic heads. We predicted back then, in our Technical Bulletin number 2, that as magnetic heads improved, the discrepancies in playback response would diminish. We also pointed out that incompatibility can have numerous causes other than equalization error. Azimuth and track height errors, caused by poor head alignment or inferior cassette housings, and Dolby level mismatch all cause improper high-frequency response. Today, some 6 years later, our predictions have come true. Magnetic heads in general have gotten better, and although Nakamichi heads remain in a class by themselves, overall cassette tech performance has improved dramatically. Heads show lower loss, and equalization curves do not vary nearly as widely as they used to. Yes, there are still some differences, and an inferior deck will not do justice to a tape made on a good machine, no matter what you do. But today, more manufacturers conform more closely to the IEC standard than ever before. Any remaining equalization discrepancies tend to lie above 15 kHz, and among high-quality decks, the differences are small indeed. If you run into any serious incompatibility among modern decks, therefore, chances are that factors other than playback equalization, such as azimuth or tape skew, are the cause. We at Nakamichi have been doing our part to uphold the international playback equalization standard. If you could find an unused 1973 vintage Nakamichi 1000, you'll find that its out-of-the-box playback curve is identical to that of the newest Nakamichi decks. We think that very few manufacturers can claim that kind of consistency over the years. We hope we've shed some light on this age-old controversy. If you run into any unusual compatibility problems, by all means contact the technical department here at Nakamichi. We're here to listen and help. And do join us again for the next Nakamichi Spoken Here, because when Nakamichi speaks, even the competition listens.